Okay, can you all hear me?
Yes.
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 All right, great. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started here. Before I turn it over to Kyle, our agenda today really pretty much is we're going to go through the draft final plan here. We have had something come up in the last couple of weeks that we want to discuss also. Mike Mach is going to help us with that. There's a concept for the core area of Atlantic Avenue that we want to take a look at and get some initial feedback from you all on that today. And then we'll go ahead and talk about our next steps in moving this forward. So Kyle, take it away.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so Kathy just kind of teed us up there. I'm going to try to get my screen share going here in a moment. Jonathan and I are going to kind of tag team this a little bit. We're going to start with the Atlantic Avenue concept. Bear with me one second. Let me get this going. All right. Are you all seeing the ramp committee meeting number 15 on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so just again, quick overview in the agenda. We're going to introduce the concept first. I suspect we'll have a decent amount of conversation around it. That's what we're wanting to hear about it to determine our next steps, if we how we integrate it within the plan, additional study that may need to happen with it. But we're gonna talk about that here in a few minutes. One thing that's not really a new concept, we've discussed it and we've got a concept or recommendation in the plan, but trying to create some additional on-street parking between Atlantic Avenue and Pacific Avenue through creating one-way pairs of those streets. So I wanted to bring up a concept to show generally what we're talking about here. It's another thing that will require some more study and conversation, but just wanted to make folks aware that is in the plan, and we would like to have some additional conversations going forward to determine if it's something we can implement. Then we're going to spend a decent amount of time doing a preview of the report. We've created just to help facilitate comments and keep them organized. We're going to kind of cover how we those expectations and how to provide us comments on the document once we get it all finalized and submit it to you all. So just a quick overview. I had to dig back a little bit. The last time we actually formally met was right before Christmas. That was December 16th. In the meantime, though, we have attended 2 Resort Beach Civic League meetings. We did have the public webinar in February. There's been some ongoing activities with TPPC, discussing some of the ramp strategies in parallel with what's going on, namely the RPP parking and the employees associated with that. So there has been quite a bit of associated conversation with the study and other initiatives. We've submitted our draft report. That was back in March, and then we've had 2 internal city reviews. So we're approaching that, what we'll call draft final, which is what we will be circulating to the ramp steering committee, just again to get some comments and some feedback before we advance it to posting it for planning commission, public comment, and then eventually to city council. So Mike, as Kathy mentioned, brought us a concept a couple weeks ago. I'm going to share Mike's concept and then turn the floor over to him to walk through what he's thinking here.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kyle. And thank you, Kyle and Kathy and everybody that's kind of helped. I know it's kind of late in the game to be giving anything, but I appreciate the consideration. So this is just a concept for the core area. So it would be between 15th and 25th. And what I'm trying to accomplish here is a few things. So I'd like for public safety, which should be our #1 concern on everybody's mind. Without a safe environment, people won't come back. And what this does is it allows for an area to be managed by creating a more user-friendly, pedestrian-friendly area. If you look between 17th and 21st Street, in the red on 18th, 19th, and 20th, as well as a couple of streets south and north, 16th, 15th, 24th, and 23rd, we've cut the road off from going through to Atlantic Avenue. And I got that idea from kind of the neighborhoods, what the neighborhoods did, and how much it helped them. But what it also accomplishes is being able to put parking on the side streets between Atlantic and Pacific, and that can be paid parking. And we could do it just like we currently do with the off-season parking, being friendly for locals. The major changes that would happen would be Atlantic Avenue from 17th to 25th would be one way, but we would leave an area for a bike path as well as an emergency lane for the police and fire and EMS to move around. 25th Street would be a way to get off of Atlantic, as well as the Fountainhead idea would be at 17th Street. So this is the main thing it's going to affect is Pacific Avenue. Turning Atlantic one way in the core area, coming off the interstate, you would only be able to take a left when you got to Atlantic Avenue or going north. And I believe there's been discussion about the McDonald's that the city has owned and being able to put in a couple of turn lanes there in order to take traffic south that needs to get to their hotels going south. I know that in the past the hotels have had issues with one way. The last time it was brought up quite a while ago, but I believe that was during the times of before Expedia and stuff like that, where visibility was key. And I think now most people look at their phone and drive straight to their destination without having to find a place that has vacancy. So I really want to hear from the hotels more so than most about how this can affect them and what could work and what couldn't. I do have a meeting with John tomorrow, so I'll really get some good input there. But what it's trying to accomplish is a managed area, which is what we can do in the green. We can turn those into linear parks, and if we're able to call it a park, we're able to open and close the parks. So that means if there's any issues down there, we can close the parks. Nobody can go into them. The parks could be used as a pedestrian area, entertainment cafe, park, green space, playgrounds, and my thought process is that these would be elevated to the same height as the sidewalk, and it would allow for easy flow back and forth. If restaurants were able to franchise for a little cafe out in front, it just creates a pedestrian area. It slows down traffic. It allows for less contact between car and pedestrian because there's only one-way traffic. If you go down to Atlantic Avenue in the middle of the summer, it's kind of like a semi-controlled chaos. If you're going south, you've got bikes coming north on your side. You've got people walking across the street. And a lot of people are paying attention to who's walking as opposed to actually driving. So it helps to create a safer environment for everybody down there. One other benefit is the state just recently passed some legislation that you're able to have an entertainment district. So if we're able to block off all of these streets, the side streets, we could put an area designated for an entertainment district, and this is a small, compact area that could work well with that. Am I missing anything? And I believe we have some pictures or examples of linear parks.
Yeah, let me pull those up. This was just a quick kind of Google search just to give some visual of I think the intent of the linear park. I think the image in the top left, you can kind of see how a street used to come through here, as Mike was talking about raising all of that linear park up to curb level, and it creates an additional space for folks to use. Got some seating area to the image below, and then the image to the right is just another example of kind of just a kind of creative way to meander the sidewalk through there, get a lot of streetscape elements into it. And this area is a little bit different. It's more of a transition into the downtown than what Atlantic Avenue looks like. But again, just a couple quick examples that I just pulled from the web just to, again, try to give a little bit of visual.
Yeah, and there's one major thing that Atlantic Avenue is lacking, and that's green. I mean, it's a concrete jungle. We've got tons of gray, but we don't have much green. This would allow for vegetation. Instead of having the bushes that we trim up as trees, we could put some real landscaping in here. I think of it as possibly being kind of like the boardwalk side of the hotels. That nice green space there. And it would aesthetically, it would add a lot to Atlantic Avenue. So I would love, and this is kind of every conversation that I've had with anybody, I'd love for people to please shoot holes in this, because if it seems like it's something worth pushing forward, I'd like to see if people would be happy with this, and do further exploration for talking with people to see what the goods, bads, and what wouldn't change, what would change. So one major thing that is going to be an obstacle will be Pacific. This now pushes a lot of vehicular traffic onto Pacific, and I believe that Pacific in this area would need to be redone first before we could get to Atlantic Avenue.
Redone in what way?
Maybe
Capacity.
Yeah.
Mike, if I may, we talked briefly with Rick Lohman about this concept, and this is part of why we want to at least get some initial thoughts today. As Mike mentioned, it does put more traffic to Pacific Avenue. So through the ramp process, we've done some just very, very preliminary high-level traffic analysis. This type of reconfiguration is going to require pretty extensive traffic modeling, traffic analysis to understand the pressure that's actually going to put on Pacific Avenue. So I think just an element for consideration here, and by no means am I suggesting that this should be our decision, because I think getting it right is more important. It would delay because that traffic analysis would have to probably happen over the course of the summer. We'd have to look at some weekday conditions, some Saturday conditions, and really assess what's going on. So from I guess a plan approval standpoint, as new as this is, we just have to look at how it could potentially delay, or how we could work around to get a portion, or some of the study approved so other initiatives can continue to happen. But again, my personal opinion is getting it right and is more important than just advancing for the sake of trying to push something through.
Totally agree.
See, John Zorkel's got his hand up too.
Thank you. I have a question.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I think it's a pretty unique idea, Mike. I know we're going to talk more about it tomorrow. Just some questions or thoughts off the top of my head. How does this work for bikes? Are you going to have a two-way bike lane through the one-way drive lane? Or, just not sure how that would come into play. I can see bicyclists aren't going to pay attention to a one-way 10-block radius, more than likely. Also, with Pacific, the dome site construction, I'm sure that's going to play into this at some point, because I'm sure they're going to have some lane closures and different things, which could cause some challenges. The side streets, when you close them off, I assume there would need to be a turnaround area at the end, because you can't have people pull in and then have to back all the way out onto Pacific Avenue. That'd be rather dangerous. And then, yeah, hotels do get a lot of walk-in business still, especially in the summertime. You'd be amazed how many people show up in Virginia Beach without a reservation and are either searching on their phone or they're driving from hotel to hotel to hotel trying to find a room. So it's definitely something we'll want to talk to our association about and get their feedback on. But overall, I mean, I think it's a unique idea. It's something that's definitely worth exploring a little further.
Yeah, and I just wanted to throw out there real quick, Kyle and I are set to come to the Hotel Association's meeting on Monday to float this.
Yeah, we appreciate y'all coming to do that, because it'll need to be explained a little better than I can do.
Well, I do want to say, yeah, thank you for that. And I don't know the answers to your questions. I am, thank goodness, a restaurateur. Really not thank goodness. I'd rather be doing this. But I just had an idea and I put it on paper. I think from here it's going to be to somebody who does this. So the bikes, I believe, I just kind of stuck the bike lane in there last night. I colored this last night. So,
Did a nice job, Mike.
Thank you.
So I'm sorry, I missed the beginning. Where is the bike lane on
The orange.
The orange. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yeah. And I kind of just stuck that in there. They didn't see that until 20 minutes ago when I sent the scanned version to them.
Billy only has his hand up. Billy?
Is there a trolley lane too?
No, there's not a trolley lane. I don't see one unless they wanted to go in the emergency lane. My anticipation is that the trolley is a little outdated and we can use micromobility. But then again, we'll find out through this pilot project that, thank you guys, that got passed.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
This is an opportunity for a real paradigm shift on Pacific Avenue.
Mhm.
And I see us trying to, again, add more traffic to it. And going back years now, at one point we talked about making a ring road or a separate area that moved that through traffic off of this area, out of this area, coming around Bird Neck area, coming back up on Alaskan Road. That would create this area, again, being something special because there's a tremendous amount that cuts over. Rudy shoots through all the way up to the north end going however many miles per hour. So is there a way to factor that in, that instead of putting more, is there a way we can redesign this so that it actually goes back and pulls that back perspective? We're not trying to clog up Pacific Avenue with through traffic, that when you come here, this is a destination area and not a cut-through area, because I can see if we're not careful, these people are going to be cutting off and going through. Arctic is going to become the major freeway. Mediterranean is going to become the major freeway if we don't figure out a way to get people's mindset to understand that this is something different. You have come here as a destination. It's not a through street. So as I'm willing to explore this, to see what we can do, but I need to be careful about how much we push back into these neighborhoods if we're not careful. And I don't want to see Pacific Avenue become more clogged, faster, 10,000 extra cars on Pacific. If anything, I'd like to see us make Pacific Avenue be a much more gentle street. I mean, since they've added those new sections up above 31st Street with the islands and the overhead park, it just has a different feel about it. People tend to be going a little bit slower. There's just a sense of to it. Where once you get past 31st Street again, it's like Katie barred the door. We're going to a fire somewhere. Yeah. So this may be an opening to doing something special and different in this entire area that encompasses the idea of arriving at a destination place.
Right. I agree. The last thing I want to do is push traffic into the neighborhoods, and that's why I wanted to have a discussion with you. And Pacific Avenue, I've told most everybody that I've met with, I feel like the key to Atlantic Avenue is Pacific Avenue, and getting Pacific Avenue to be able to handle the amount of traffic that we have in general right now. It struggles with what we have now. So I definitely think it's going to take more exploration to figure out what needs to be done in order for something like this or this to be done.
Yeah, and I want to thank Guy again for getting those traffic miles per hour coming in off of 264. Just lowering them has made a major difference in the sense of heat when you come in. Now they're 25 miles an hour. How do we carry that throughout the rest of the resort district if we're trying to create a sense of arrival, a sense of place? So.
Billy has his hand up.
Yeah, good morning. I know Rick is on the call and Richard Maddox is on the call, but this is not the first time we've played this one-way Atlantic Avenue movie. It was studied back in the early 2000s and deemed to be a very viable opportunity to move traffic quickly. And I think what Mike said in the very beginning is that people find their destinations differently now than they did back in the 90s and when they were on a map and trying to find a hotel number or a restaurant number. So I think there's a lot of data, Kyle, from that study. I think Rick was at Parkins Brinkerhoff then. But I think there's a lot of information that was done about this that proved that traffic would move better than it is today. So I support at least studying this because it was valid a long time ago, but wasn't able to get across the goal line. Thanks.
I'll jump in. This is Rick Levin. And just for reference, Chuck Hayton was the area manager for Parsons Brinkerhoff at the time we did that study back in 1999. It was actually proposed to be implemented in the summer of 2000, and City Council decided not to implement the fountainhead. But it did require a lot of analysis, both from the consultant and the city. It did require a lot of improvements to Pacific Avenue. It didn't even entail cutting off the side streets. I think cutting off the side streets is gonna change Pacific Avenue because cars won't be able to use Atlantic Avenue to get out of some of these parking lots and to get, around the ocean, but they're gonna have to go to Pacific Avenue. So Pacific Avenue is gonna have a lot more pressure put on it, especially in the southbound direction. If we're funneling all the traffic on Atlantic Avenue northbound, southbound is gonna feel the pressure of the vehicles. And to Nancy's point of regarding using the Vernon bypass.
Okay, Mark, you keep flipping in and out.
It's Rick.
Rick, I'm sorry, Rick, you keep flipping in and out on us.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, talk directly.
Okay. Well, I was just trying to say that it will require a lot of study and it will put a lot of pressure on Pacific Avenue. So there will be improvements needed to Pacific Avenue, and it will probably require some right-of-way acquisition. So it's not going to be all rosy.
Never is.
Okay. Just one, I think it's a great opportunity and unique, like has been talked about before. My concern would be with the busy days that we have during the year. Public safety will be a extreme stakeholder in this when the traffic gets congested in all the oceanfront area. If they have to respond with heavy apparatus, police response, EMS, those types of things, should you have an incident. Everything, if you move everything to Pacific and the back streets, everything's going to become congested even more so on the busy holiday weekends that we've got. And so the public safety folks are going to have to weigh in pretty significantly.
Yeah, I had an initial conversation with Captain McBride, and it was met with reserved enthusiasm. He seemed to really like the concept, but wanted to see what it could do. I think from a pedestrian crowd control, he saw a huge benefit for it. We did not get into the details too much just because it was over the weekend and I was kind of hanging out in front of the substation with him. One thing I didn't mention is 17th Street would become kind of the major area for a lot of traffic. And we have a very timely and unique ability right now to kind of mold how Virginia Beach Boulevard, 17th Street is. It's going through design right now, and if there's going to be, and instead of having a lot of that traffic come off of 21st Street and going south to 17th Street and then getting on Atlantic, if we could get with Waze and Google Maps, iMaps, whatever, to have them route people if they're going southbound on Atlantic past 17th to get off at Bird Neck and come down Virginia Beach Boulevard and then take a right. So I'm not a traffic and engineering person, but it could alleviate some of that stress on Pacific between 21st and 17th. That was one other thing.
I don't know if this has been addressed, but Chris Nykirk had a question in the chat asking, how do the parking streets work? Turn around, say, ends. Chris, can you?
So yeah, I think what she's trying to say is there enough room for people to turn around in the cul-de-sacs, and how much parking can we get there? These are answers that I don't have.
Yeah, the mall in Charlottesville is what is in my mind on that, if you've been there, and it's tight. I mean, it's messy on Saturday when everybody's down there. If you pull in there, it'll take you a while to get back out, but you can do it. I mean, there are curb cuts at the end that go into parking lots, and if you don't want to stay, you don't have to. You can get out. I've done it. I've seen people do it, but it's not easy.
Well, and I think it's important to note that this is very preliminary. So we're not even at that design stage, but we know there's no way that this can progress if we can't get people out, in and out smoothly.
Right.
And the Charlottesville Mall idea that was just brought up too. I mean, one other thing to point out there is there are streets that go through the mall. So like just using 19th as an example,
Right.
you know, it's clear. I mean, it's curb level, you know, that the street is curb level. So it's apparent to the driver that you're driving through a pedestrian space. So there is maybe a hybrid in here where these are partially open, closable, something like that. I mean, I think these are all details that we need to flesh out if we do look at this going forward.
Mark Shea. Mark.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make it clear and mention to everybody, despite what happens with the Route 30 on Atlantic Avenue, that this will impact all four of the trolley routes as well as 3 of the year-round routes. I just wanted to make sure that HRT will be included, you know, from the very beginning of the process of studying this. Thank you.
Mark?
And deliveries.
Deliveries.
That's a big one.
Yes, I was thinking for some of the smaller vehicles that deliver box trucks and stuff, they could get to the cul-de-sac. I don't know if that's really ideal or not, but the larger trucks that deliver to restaurants and hotels, deliveries on the east side in the emergency lane is what I was thinking, but I don't know if that's doable either. Kind of how it is on during the times.
Well, early in the morning, there's not a whole lot of traffic down there. I mean, aren't most of these folks in and out by 10 o'clock? Is there a time? I know BJ's kind of premise there?
I think the deliveries end at 1.
Is it one, is there, if we're trying to reconfigure and we have an opportunity here, some of these are, I don't know, I don't want to dismiss them, but is there a way we can find to work around, to work with these folks, maybe to tighten them up? Is there some way to, I'm looking for ways to make things happen right, rather than ways that become stumbling blocks that we never move off the dead center, and we just stay with what we have today, which we know is not our most ideal opportunity. So how can we work with some of these folks maybe to?
Mike's right, the only option you have is the emergency lane, so that, public safety's gotta be involved in all of this. And maybe that's something to be looked at. I mean,
Right.
A lot of times it's thrown aside, as we'll get to it later, it needs to be addressed up front.
I agree.
Everybody's gotta get deliveries.
That's one of the details that we need to look at.
Definitely. I think one good thing is that it's very compact in the area that we're going to be doing it, and it's in the area that needs the most help. The south end is okay by itself, and we don't have issues there as many issues, and as well as the north end. Central Beach is stressed with people, vehicles. It's got the most concentration of people, which when you have concentrations of people, you have issues that arrive from that too. So I truly believe that this can help every single issue that we're actually trying to, problem that we're trying to solve. So I wouldn't have brought it up this late in the game and tried to get some consensus to at least explore it further if I really didn't think that it was going to be beneficial. And we could even turn this into something iconic for Virginia Beach. We could do the landscape so that it spells Virginia Beach out. So from an aerial, it kind of gives that, and that's what you think of when you think of Virginia Beach, is that area, just like, the Charlottesville Mall. Or we could do something fun, make waves out of landscaping, just something different and unique that everybody will remember Virginia Beach by.
BJ and Martin.
Yeah. Kathy, I just wanted to throw one thought out on the table, and this is not just for this scenario, but in years past, and I've lost track of the years at this point, we had a program that really emphasized getting off at Bird Neck Road and accessing the beach from a lot of different areas. And I can't help but think that that's something that would serve us well to try to incorporate into whatever it is that we come up with. I mean, I think at that point we had designated Norfolk Avenue, and they might have been a sand dollar, or 19th Street or 17th Street. I forget what the streets were, but we had a pattern that people could follow coming in. And just a thought that, that might help in a lot of instances here, is to access that. And it might alleviate some of the issues that we're talking about as far as Pacific Avenue and keeping the traffic from getting pushed back into the neighborhoods. Just a thought.
Yeah.
Gotcha, thank you.
And that's a good thing too, to mention. The traffic study that we're going to see with Pacific Avenue, I would imagine is going to be extremely high volume. But if we're able to make these changes, like BJ said, and possibly, getting the routes changed in ways in Google to get to people's hotels, I think that those numbers could possibly stay the same instead of increasing even more. But studies will tell, I guess.
Richard Maddox.
To BJ's point, just a quick reminder too that one of the priority recommendations out of RAMP is the digital parking wayfinding program. So I think to your point about Norfolk Avenue and the Seashell, like now we would have, digital signs showing the parking availability at 9th Street, and then we can then guide them the way, through the breadcrumb signs to the place where we want them to park. So I think that could assist in in the point you made there about trying to control how and where people access the resort.
Richard?
Yeah, hi. I like this a lot, and I would hope that we would remain open-minded. I know one way has been the third rail of resort politics for a very, very long time. And my first initial thought is that in my mind, many of the most vocal opponents to it are gone and have sold their properties, and we've got new folks down there that own these hotels. And I would hope that they would take a fresh look at this. I love the word used about iconic. This thing reminds me, if anybody's ever been to the High Line in New York City, how they took that elevated railway and converted it into this amazing walkway with heavy landscaping. And I think this could do more to change the feel and character of Atlantic Avenue than anything I've seen so far. I think it's got great potential, and I hope we at least don't shoot it down right out of the bat. I think this could have some real potential.
Thank you, Richard.
You're welcome.
See anyone else?
Hey, Josh Goyette from the fire department. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes, yes.
Okay. So just from a fire department aspect or public safety, just some considerations with this. So obviously we like the fact that you got the emergency lane going because that's going to be important for us. And that'll give us access to all the buildings on the east side. Any fire or incident that happens on the west side of Atlantic though, especially with the green space that puts the buildings now further away from our trucks. And depending on now even where the hydrants are, whether we move them or not. But we'll obviously have to get close, so we can't do that work on the emergency lane. So then we end up in the travel lane for those incidents, which now we likely have to shut down this section of Atlantic Avenue for any even fire alarms for incidents on the west side. And then if we divert a whole lot of traffic and 17th Street then gets real backed up, just keep in mind that that's where the fire trucks and EMS trucks tend to come from because that's where the station is. So just some consideration. And obviously we will have to, even though everybody else will have to turn south when they get to Atlantic off of 17th, we will need that ability. Like there can't be a shut off for us to be able to turn left there because that's going to be our access, and we can't go around the entire Ruby Loop just to get to where we need to go.
Oh yes, no, I agree. I think the anticipation there. Sorry, I used a whole lot of whiteout on this. The anticipation was to be able to go both ways off of 17th, southbound and northbound. I think I covered up one of my arrows.
I think you whited it out.
I did.
You can see the white out.
Welcome to planning.
Another hand.
This is Brett John, EMS. Could you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Good morning. Just to touch on what Josh Goyette said from the fire department, EMS, we kind of echo the same things with 17th Street being the main thoroughfare to get us to the oceanfront with ambulances and zone car apparatus. If you divert more traffic down that way, it also will get tight. Also keep in mind the lifeguard service, BBLS, is across the street off of 17th Street as well. So they use 17th and 18th Street to get down to the oceanfront. Mostly 18th during the summer to take their lifeguards, jet skis, things like that. So they would need to find an alternate route if we close off 18th Street from like the Pacific to Atlantic thoroughfare. I think this is an awesome idea. I think this is something that is definitely would revitalize the whole oceanfront. And like you said, it would make it totally iconic, which is something that we need. But really, it's just access points. And then obviously with the Atlantic Park project coming in the fall, cutting off that 300 block of 19th Street, how would that impact more part of the traffic pattern and pushing traffic further west on that Arctic and Mediterranean loop area?
Are there any other questions in the chat?
I'm seeing a lot, but yeah. I don't know the answer. Let me go back. Let me just go back.
So, and one thing, guys, just for us to, and we see the questions in the chat, but I think we need to, and Kyle, I'll leave this to you, but I think if we want to accomplish what we want to accomplish today, we need to probably move into the document. Understanding that we're going to the Hotel Association on Monday, we've got to talk to public safety. I mean, so far we're hearing a lot of good comments on this. So what we're going to have to think about, depending on the outcome of the other stakeholder groups, is, okay, how do we move the plan forward? We have a lot of initiatives that we're going forward with regardless. Obviously the pilot, there's work that we can do on the whole north end of Atlantic Avenue. So it's not to say that if we explore this further that it's going to stop the progress, and we just need to have some conversation internally and with the steering committee of how to move this thing forward.
I think it would be beneficial, Kathy. I mean, we've gotten a couple just initial comments from, just fire and EMS as an example, but I think it would be beneficial if you all could create us a list of considerations that we need to be looking into as part of the study, or I guess the sub-study of this area. And that way we can kind of get our heads around like what types of things we need to be evaluating. And I would look to the individual technical experts of those specific areas to guide us on that. And that could get us started at least with the kind of the short list of things that we need to be checking each of the boxes on.
And we're gonna have
That's
a
good.
soon too, so maybe I'm sure they would love to hear about this.
Yeah.
I'll get the date for you, so we'd like to be on the schedule.
Sure.
Since we're right in the middle of it, and we live with whatever goes on down there. We're here 24/7.
And the Restaurant Association obviously would be interested.
Yes.
Yeah, I think and Mike will talk to you about this. We'd like to hit all of these groups. We just know that the first two we want to get to is the Hotel Association and Public Safety.
All right. Thank you guys for the consideration.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, I'm going to flip back over to this. I'm going to hit the one-way concept fairly quickly with the connector streets, just to give a brief overview. Again, this is going to be another one that's going to require some additional conversation. This probably will come into play as we're looking at the new concept for Atlantic Avenue. But just to give a brief overview of just some of the conceptuals of what we've looked at to date. The intent of this, again, is to try to one-way the streets in between Atlantic Avenue and Pacific Avenue with the main intent of creating additional on-street parking, either through the ability now to angle the spaces and create more stalls, or in some instances adding additional parallel spaces, just depending on the width of the street. The screen capture I've got here is just 34th to 37th Street. We would be keeping some of the key corridors two-way. So for example, 5th Street, 9th Street, 17th, probably 18th with the emergency access, 31st Street, 30th Street, et cetera. But just preliminary thought on, how much space or how many spaces we could potentially add, anywhere from 64 to 170 spaces, just depending on the configurations of the street. So again, more conversation, more study, traffic impacts related, access to properties and parcels, and just some of the things that need to go into this a little bit more before we advance it forward. But again, just wanted to bring your attention to that. And then Jonathan, I think you are up. I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan for document preview, orient you to what we've pulled together, where we're going to be hoping to get some of your input and feedback. And I will stop sharing and allow you to take over control.
Sounds good. So yeah, when we think about what's coming your way next week, we're really kind of characterizing this as a review. Most of the information that you're about to see over the next week is information that's been previously shared through a lot of our previous meetings or previous surveys, or even some documents that landed in your hands previously. Some of that information is packaged a little bit differently, but for the most part, it truly is a review of stuff that you have already seen. With what we've already discussed this morning, over the next several days, we are going to kind of continue to make a few tweaks to the document as it currently stands before it lands in your inbox. And part of that is to potentially figure out how do we advance the overall mobility plan while still leaving the door open for exploring kind of this new concept for kind of the central beach area. And so with that, we're going to provide the report early next week. And as Kyle alluded, we have created a survey tool for us to collect input from you all. That survey tool is SurveyMonkey, so it should be familiar to kind of some of the other reviews, most recently with the multimodal and the parking strategies that you all provided input on just a few months ago. Now, what we want to do is for you all to focus your review on kind of making sure that what you're seeing, particularly for the recommendations, reflect the conversations we've had with you, with the stakeholders, with the public, dating all the way back to when this process started, which, believe it or not, was I think around August of 2020. So we were still trying to figure out what the heck the pandemic was, and now we're trying to figure out other things. So what I'd like to do is to start kind of with a quick overview of the report structure. You can almost think about the report occurring in 3 different volumes. So volume 1 is what we're currently referring to as the mobility framework, and that simply details on the planning process, as well as a lot more information on the existing and projected conditions for the different modes, for the different events, for the reports and plans that have come before us. We kind of pulled that out of the main body of the report and put that into kind of this first volume, which again we're calling the mobility framework. Now the ramp report itself is kind of in volume 2, and that's where you're going to find all of the recommendations as well as the action plan. And then that third volume is going to be a series of appendices. And what's really valuable about those appendices is it's where there's going to be a lot more detail in terms of the recommendations. So as an example of that, and I'll show you just in just a second, in the core part of the report, so in volume 2, we make reference to all of those multimodal and parking strategies. But if you want to really read kind of the detailed paragraph for each of those strategies, that's going to be in the appendix. Another example is we've got I forget how many, a dozen, around 20 intersections and kind of corridor segments that we have detailed recommendations for. In volume 2, the core part of the report, that's more of a summary table. But if you wanted to actually see the schematics and kind of really dig into the details, that's where you would want to go to the appendix for that. So with that, I am going to share my screen, and what I'll do is I'll kind of flip through the report somewhat quickly. I think the intent here is to orient you all to the document, and then I'll give you a sneak preview of the survey tool so that you can kind of see what that's going to look like when it lands in your inbox. And with apologies for me to be looking off to my right at my second monitor, but that's what I'm about to do. So this would be volume 1. So this is the mobility framework. It starts with acknowledgments, table of contents, and then we get into kind of the meat of kind of the people, places, and trends. So this is kind of the summary of kind of existing conditions about population and kind of where people are traveling. We've got a spread here about special events. We get into land use and the resort area development that's been adapted and updated from what you all may have seen in the race app just a couple of years ago. We have a section about the street network. So here's where you will find more detailed information about traffic and congestion. We highlight the current and the completed street improvement projects. And then again, we get into a lot of the details that you all have previously seen as it relates to kind of how people are moving around the resort area in terms of vehicle delay and crashes and traffic safety. For the active transportation section, we're providing an existing overview of the bicycle and pedestrian facilities, and we're taking information from the active transportation plan and showing bicycle level of stress. And then we get into transit and shared mobility. Here we're kind of reviewing the different bus routes that exist and kind of what we've heard as it relates to transit and the trolley and all of that. And we have some information here on shared mobility, so the scooter trips as well. The parking section for the mobility framework, again, kind of goes into both the supply and the demand side of parking. All of this is to kind of tee up the parking strategies and the parking projects that are recommended in volume 2. And we kind of conclude the parking section with an overview of parking rates and then a quick recap of the RPP program. And that's really it. So that's kind of the first volume. So that's all about, again, existing and projected conditions. So when the survey tool and these documents arrive in your inbox next week, what you're really going to do is focus your attention on the second volume, which is where all of the recommendations are included. We've got an executive summary here, just to kind of tee up the process, kind of an introduction in terms of an overview of the mobility process and kind of how it all came together. A quick recap of the guiding documents. We've got the mobility vision and goals here on this spread, and then we jump right into the strategies. And so if you recall, the strategies themselves are kind of put into 2 separate buckets. We've got the multimodal strategies and the parking strategies. And so as I mentioned, what you're seeing here in volume 2 is really just a quick kind of a sentence or 2 about each of these strategies. But if you were to flip over to volume 3, which is the appendix, you'll see that kind of the information is repeated a little bit, but there's just a lot more detail. So as you're reviewing, if you see, okay, I don't quite understand what exactly strategy 1.2 is under objective 1, go to the appendix, read a little bit more about it, and hopefully it'll provide you the background that you need to kind of weigh in on that particular strategy. The next thing in volume 2 is the list of projects. And so we've grouped these into the network recommendations and then corridors and intersections. And so the network recommendations are the recommended bicycle network and the recommended pedestrian network. So again, this is information that should be familiar to you all if you've kind of been following along as we've been going through this process. The corridors and intersections, that's another one where here in volume 2, we're providing you kind of just a quick overview of that information and then directing you to the appendix if you want to really dig deep into a particular location. So the corridor and intersection improvements are really kind of shown here on in this table on page 34. And so that's kind of telling you kind of what types of improvements are needed at different intersections and along different corridors. Eventually, we're going to hyperlink this information so that it's easier to navigate through the document. As it relates to transit and shared mobility, we've kind of, again, grouped these recommendations into a few different categories. We've got route recommendations, which talks about changes to Route 30, adding the fixed shuttle service, and then creating the new transfer facility. We've got the microtransit recommendations. So here's where the ramp document makes reference to the pilot project that is about to get started very soon, and then how we take the information from that pilot project and eventually evaluate what is the best permanent solution for microtransit and the trolley in the future. And then we do have, as is necessary, some information here on shared mobility as well. So for parking, here we've got kind of just some specific parking projects. So we talk about parking wayfinding, and then kind of the off-street and on-street parking inventory and some of the projects that could be used to increase parking supply. And Kyle alluded to some of those just a couple of minutes ago. So the fourth section of this volume is about Atlantic Avenue. And so here we kind of provide an overview of the process that we arrived at to get to the recommended the recommended concepts for each of the three segments. So the segment kind of north of 25th, the segment south of 17th, and then that middle section that we're going to evaluate in a little bit more detail. And so for each of those kind of sections, we're providing the existing streetscape, the recommended streetscape, and then a photo simulation so that you all can kind of visualize what the vision is for that particular section. So that's 40th to 25th, 25th to 17th. And again, this is one that, you know, we might need to kind of pull out of this particular report so that we can allow kind of the due process to evaluate the new alternative. And then 17th to 5th. And then there's a series of design considerations that we're going to ask you to weigh in on. And so here we're just talking about different design options that could occur at you know, any particular intersection along Atlantic Avenue. And so you can see kind of it's color coded. So on the line here, you can see it starts with 5th Street and goes all the way to 40th. And it's just saying, okay, you know, for this particular intersection, this is what should be considered as improvements are made in the future. And then we get into the action plan. This is the, you know, one of the last sections. Here we've taken those objectives and strategies from the multimodal strategies and parking strategies and pulled them into kind of a summary of kind of, is this a standalone project? What is the duration? You know, how much staff time is going to be necessary to implement a particular strategy? What is our perceived level of impact? Is this going to really kind of you know, turn the needle on some of what we're trying to achieve in the resort area, or is it more of a smaller improvement? And then get into, you know, whether or not the private sector is involved and how we could go about funding it if funding is necessary. We are showing some phasing, so short-term, immediate, long-term, that kind of thing. Now, when you get the survey next week, there's not really a whole lot of questions specific to the action plan, but we do welcome you all to kind of review it. And if you've got questions or comments, there's certainly a place in the survey where you can provide some of that input. We do something similar with kind of the projects themselves. And so you'll see that we've got the bike network projects, the corridor projects, and the intersection projects kind of pulled out of that previous chapter and placed here again with some level of guidance as decisions are being made in terms of you know, what is the cost and what is the right-of-way impacts and those kinds of things that are much more applicable when we're talking about infrastructure and physical projects as opposed to, you know, strategies and actions that are more administrative. And so I mean, that's pretty much the bulk of the document. There's a, you know, a brief section here, kind of a conclusion, if you will. That's like, I know you all just drank from a fire hydrant for probably the 15th time today, but wanted to kind of pause there before I pull up the survey tool just to see if there are any initial questions about what's going to land in your inbox next week.
I only have a comment. It's not necessarily a question, and it's more of an administrative, how from a timing standpoint, this will be rolled out so that the entire RAC Commission has the opportunity to digest all of this information. I know that TPPC will be looking at it, but at some point in time, this has to be presented to RAC, and I would like for the commissioners to have had an opportunity to digest it prior to that meeting.
I would suggest that when it comes to TPPC, it goes to RAC at the same time.
Okay.
That'd be my suggestion. Unless
Okay.
somebody else has different. Does that make sense to you, Kyle and Kathy?
She's off.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and we're like with the new concept today, we're reworking kind of the next steps in terms of advancing it towards, again, planning commission and city council. So BJ, maybe we can work offline on how best to do that. I personally feel like it could be beneficial before it lands in the RAC commissioner's inbox the following week that we at least do an overview presentation versus just kind of dumping a bigger or a report on people's plates that have, maybe been following this from afar.
We can schedule a special meeting for that, so that information, I think the overview of how it is structured would be very beneficial to the commissioners, and that we don't have to stay within the regular meeting schedule to do that. We can call a special meeting. This is a really big deal.
All right. Well, I say let's connect offline and figure out timing of that, and we can certainly get something scheduled there.
Okay. I just have a follow-up question. Now, once we get this dumped into our inbox and we have a chance to look at it, do we come back as the TPPC? If we have anything, we're gonna have a conversation about this, or is this just for information and then it's gonna move on to RAC? Is there, I don't know that there's gonna be any changes, or if they're just questions or whatever. I just wanted to know what's from point A here to where it goes to the RAC. Is there
It would seem to me
interim or
that we
not?
would need to take some action before it goes to RAC. BJ?
Normally, the committee would either say they recommend this or don't write, or they recommend it, but not specific areas of the plan. This is a project that's much bigger than what we normally have to deal with there. It's very comprehensive to the entire resort area. So I would say maybe combine TPPC with RAC, just so we get the benefit of all of that knowledge.
So I think we would discuss it next month.
Okay.
Right.
That's, I just want to know where we're going with this and.
That makes sense to you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's been a huge amount of work that's been done, in the trenches that
Absolutely.
I have,
Yeah,
I'm here and they've been down here in the weeds doing this for so long, and it is their forte, but, I'm kind of excited about what the possibilities are with this, including this too, So it's a whole new avenue for conversation.
Hey guys, I take my hat off to you for getting all of this information together. I remember sitting in that first meeting and just being truly overwhelmed by the amount of stuff that had to be gone through, and thinking to myself, how are they ever going to do it? But you have methodically worked your way through it, and it sounds like we've got a great document to look at.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I know it's been interesting for Kyle and I and kind of the SGA staff, just in terms of the report that's going to land in your inbox looks very different than some of the earlier drafts that we kind of had internal. It's kind of taken a lot of different shapes because there's a fine line in terms of paying respect to the process and all of the data and all of the conversations and input that went into it, and creating a document that's simply usable. And so we're hoping that that's kind of where we've landed.
Last question. The general public is a part of this too. Once it goes through RAC, then, and yay or nay, whatever in RAC, then it's exposed to the general public for comments out there. Okay, just want to make sure we get that. Thank you.
And with we had a great participation and positive feedback on the public webinar that we had a couple of weeks ago or a couple of months ago. And so, I think the hope and the intent is that we can lean more on kind of the head nods that we got a couple of months ago in terms of the overall recommendations. And so, that process where it gets rolled out to the public does go a little bit smoother because there should be the perception that they're seeing something for the first time. They've at least been afforded the opportunity to participate in this process kind of throughout. Let me kind of conclude with this. And so I mentioned the survey tool. And so what we're going to do is once the report is ready for viewing by you all, we're going to send the report as well as a link to the survey that you see on your screen. And we tried to make it a little bit easy for you all to kind of follow along. And so what we've done is, and obviously the answers aren't going to be populated when you get it, but we're saying, okay, let's focus right now on the multimodal strategies. So look at pages 13 to 15 of the report, and the question is repeated. It's the same question that we're asking throughout this survey, and it's simply, how well does this part of the recommendations reflect what has been discussed throughout the ramp process? And you can say completely, somewhat, a little, not at all, or if you don't have an opinion, just say you don't have an opinion. Now, if for whatever reason you don't think that a particular section of the document reflects what we've been talking about all along, do us a favor. If you put a little or not at all, once you get down to the end of that particular page, provide us some comments. If tell us why you don't think that is reflective of kind of the overall process. Again, I think when we come back to you all and we're able to kind of talk about what we heard as part of your review, we're going to really kind of focus on any areas that there's some confusion or some disagreement. And so this survey tool is going to let us shine some light on what those areas of the overall document are. And so, like I said, it's that's multimodal strategies. It goes into parking strategies. It talks about the Atlantic Avenue concepts and breaks it into, okay, for the 40th to 25th Street segment, does this reflect what we've talked about? And again, you can say basically yes or no, and then provide a comment as to why you answered a particular way. And then the survey kind of concludes with a final kind of text box where you can provide any thoughts that you haven't kind of expressed earlier in the survey. And then just hit done, and that will land, that'll be sent back to us, and then we'll get together as a team and kind of figure out what we learned from your all's review. We are asking you to focus on the recommendations. I know it's hard to look at a report like this and not try to wordsmith things or question word choice and those kinds of things. Really want you to kind of focus your attention on that.
We lost the audio, Jonathan.
For another quarter in.
He's unmuted.
I think what he was trying to say was focus on the content and the recommendations and everything that has gone in with the process. Like, we don't want anything here to be a surprise to you all. A lot of this information lives in previous ramp PowerPoints. And so hopefully none of this stuff is new. But again, as we organizing the responses back from this tool, it'll show us, we had 15 responses of that, parking objective 1, everybody said, completely agree with it. So that would be one we could move on from. But if we are seeing some disparity in some of the comments and responses, we just want to make sure that those we can shed some more light or, provide some more clarification on those types of things. The other, I guess, the 2 points that are the point I think he was also trying to get across there is, this survey is only oriented towards the recommendations document. So the other 2 volumes of the document are there for your use. We're not necessarily collecting comments. Again, it's a recap of the existing conditions, just some of the findings that we've had throughout the process. It's there, and this is how we envision the public using this document as well. We don't want to overwhelm people with all of this information, so it's there if you want to go looking for it, but this document will provide enough of a summary of the process, some of the key decision points, and then again, just the recommendations. We want this to be the living document for staff and the community to use to advance priorities from the plan. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So let me just pull up schedule. Jonathan mentioned this being distributed next week. We're going to have one more internal review with Deb and team just to make sure we've got all of the individual city review comments buttoned up before this hits your inbox. So it's probably going to be the week of May 9th before you're going to see anything there. Our next scheduled TPPC or RAMP committee meeting will be May 26th. It's about a 2-week turnaround. I recognize that's quick. BJ, based on your comment with RAC and providing an opportunity there, we'll revisit this to see if maybe we need to do like a mid-month RAMP committee meeting. But let Deb and I work offline, and we'll make sure those dates are clear to you all once we distribute the document. And then we'll provide hopefully ample time for you all to spend some time with it. The beauty of the SurveyMonkey tool is as the results come through, we'll see those, and so it won't take us too much time to get the summary of those results pulled back together. The individual comments might take us a little bit more time to get through, but we certainly want to understand what those are. And then it took us about I think this is meeting number 15, but I think this is the first one we might kind of be wrapping up about 15 minutes early, unless anybody has any other questions or comments related to what we talked about here today.
I don't think so, Kyle. Thanks very much for you and Jonathan for everything you've done on this. It's quite the document, and I think it'll be a great tool for us going forward.
Thank you. We've certainly appreciated and enjoyed the process. It's been quite a ride, and I mean, hopefully it's just getting started from my opinion, and we start to see a lot of these things come to fruition.
Okay.
Deb, any parting?
Yeah, I just want to thank you everybody. Thank you, Kyle, Jonathan, and the steering committee. We will have the document out to you in the next week and look for comments, and then we'll revisit the schedule and get in front of everybody with the presentation, most likely a joint meeting with TPPC and RAC. So thank you so much. If you have any questions, meanwhile, please send me an email or give me a call. Thank you.